Hello and welcome to my review of last night of the Proms, and apologies as this video was going out a bit late. Unfortunately, this is our last episode of Series 6, but fortunately, Series 7 has already been confirmed and will start filming later this year. So get your tiny flags and handkerchiefs at the ready if you're into that sort of thing, and let's talk about this week's episode. This time, number 9 takes place during the last night of the Proms in the home of Dawn, her husband Mick, and her elderly father Ralph. The bunting is well and truly out, and they're trying to get everyone else into the party spirit. But that's easier said than done. Joining them are the family of Dawn's sister Penny, including her teenage son Oliver, who can't be arsed with anything, and her husband Brian, a music lover who spends his time being an absolute bell-end to everyone. We witness personal grievances, domestic drama, and strong undertones of Brexit Britain, all against the backdrop and score of the Proms event. The family also gets an unexpected visitor, and I'll be discussing that in more detail once we get to the spoiler talk. First of all, it feels like this episode assumes some level of familiarity with the last night of the Proms. If that's where you're coming from, then I'd imagine you get some fascinating insights into the choice of music, the pageantry, and the audience reactions, both on screen and at home. We also get angrily corrected on a few popular misinterpretations of the songs and lyrics by Reece Shearsmith's character, and angry Reece is always good for a laugh. The music itself plays a key role in structuring the episode, heightening the sense of drama, and in some cases, providing a hefty dose of irony and symbolism. For those who want to learn more about it, then there's plenty of detail in the Inside Number 9 podcast, which you'll find linked below as usual. Now, to me personally, the theatrics of the last night of the Proms was something I was largely unaware of. That's not to say I've never had anything to do with the Proms. I've actually been to the Proms and it was a really lovely thing to experience. But the whole last night pageantry left me feeling more confused than anything else. It all just felt very weird and alien to me, and so I was trying my best to get my head around it all. I also happened to be watching the episode with my partner, who isn't British but has 2 musical degrees and is aware of the event, and I had to keep asking him, does that actually happen, and why? For anyone else who is unfamiliar, I can confirm that most of the audience stuff does actually happen, but the why might have been a bit lost on both of us. For context, I'm Scottish, in case that wasn't completely obvious from my voice, and I really don't think that celebrating the last night of the Proms is much of a thing where I come from. But of course, please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. All I can say is that I never knew anyone who watched the last night of the Proms, never mind anyone who threw a party. So yeah, some of the cultural aspects of this might have been a bit lost on me. To be fair, the episode does include some dialogue where the characters start conflating British nationalism with English nationalism, before correcting themselves and mentioning the Scots and the Welsh too, along with terrible attempts at doing accents. However, there was no mention of Northern Ireland at all. That's not a criticism, as that did feel quite appropriate to the type of character Steve was playing, and I feel like it added to the already deliberate sense of cringe. Plus, Steve's attempt at dabbing was something else. And of course, we really can't talk about the episode without addressing the big Brexit elephant in the room. The undercurrents were always going to be there in an episode where some characters are all swept up in the flag waving and jingoism, while other characters clearly despise the whole affair. But it also goes way beyond subtext, as the subject of Brexit is brought up directly and frequently as the episode ticks on and the bitterness gives way to anger. Now, I usually love me some comedies about horrible people and the way that Steve and Reece write domestic discomfort. For example, I love Charlie and Stella from The League of Gentlemen, and you might have heard me defending Nana's Party in my least popular number 9's video. But for me, this episode ended up feeling a bit too close to home and portrays an all too real situation that in many ways doesn't feel like it's getting any better. Many families have now spent years divided over the issue, and if that's been the case for you, then trust me, I feel it for you. And while this show absolutely can talk about Brexit, because I don't think any subject should be off the table, I'm not sure that this episode really said or added anything new to the conversation. Come to think of it, I think I preferred how they handled it with Tubbs and Edward in the League anniversary specials. The idea that certain approaches to nationalism cultivates attitudes that can hurt or harm others isn't new, and this one plays out in a strange way, but we'll get to that later. Maybe that was the point, just to let the issues play out, and oh god, is this an issue-based play? Better get Ollie Plimsolls on the line. I think what I'm feeling is that after many exhausting years, it kind of feels like everything to be said about Brexit has already been said ad nauseum, and some of us are now very, very tired. Again, it's not a criticism of the episode, just my personal feelings. Similar to how I said that Nana's party might not be as funny if your family has a history of alcoholism, Last Night at the Proms might resonate in an uncomfortable way if your family was divided over Brexit. And just while we're on the subject, I'd like to give a quick reminder to please be kind to other people in the comments. I know that I'm very, very lucky in my subscriber base, and number 9 tends to attract a good crowd, and you all seem like lovely, well-spoken people, so I don't think that should be a problem. But I've had a lot of new traffic on my channel lately, and I've been busier than ever, so I just don't have the time to moderate everything. I love our discussions, and I've never had to close a comment section before, so please, let's keep it friendly. There's enough bitterness and hatred in the world already, and we're all number 9 fans here. As for the cast, these were all round solid performances, and most of the characters' interactions felt very realistic, at least up until a point. Some of them didn't have all that much to do though, and most of them were generally unlikable, which isn't always a problem, and I'll always enjoy Reece Shearsmith exploding into a furious semi-coherent rant. But at the same time, it was kinda hard to root for anyone, and there was only one character I really felt sorry for, which we'll get into in the spoiler talk. Overall though, I didn't feel as much of a connection with the material as I did in some of the previous episodes, except with the parts that left me feeling a bit depressed and uncomfortable, so I'm not in a massive hurry to rewatch this one. Although who knows, maybe I'll feel differently about it when I eventually do. Well, we're just about to go into spoiler talk now, so if you're leaving us here, then thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this series, and please remember to subscribe if you haven't already, because I do have one more video planned for next week. I'm still figuring out how to go about it, but we'll be looking at some of the best bits from Series 6 and what stories, characters and performances I liked the most. Thanks again, and I wish you all the best. Right, let's get into some spoiler talk, shall we? Because you've probably noticed that there's one character I haven't really talked about yet, and what his presence may or not mean to the overall story. So, let's talk about Yusuf, or Jesus. I'll be using both names interchangeably. Because we can read the final scene in two ways. Either Penny was imagining the image of Yusuf based on who she believes he was, and perhaps through a longing for something more in her life. Or maybe he really was the Messiah and her husband was a very naughty boy. But either way, the idea that he might be Jesus is kinda central to the episode, so we're gonna have a look at what that means. Now, I'm not usually a big fan of Christian allegories and symbolism, as it always feels a bit on the nose for me. Someone's always got to get something that looks like stigmata and die in a crucifix pose. That doesn't mean that all Jesus imagery is bad or that no one should ever do it, I just personally don't find it all that interesting. And yet I really enjoyed their portrayal of the devil in last week's episode, so I'm not sure what that says about me. But in this case, I'd say that the ambiguity was well handled, and I like that there was a rational explanation behind all of those miracles. I mean, I know he turned water into booze in the Bible, but from what I remember, he never used it to spike a kid. That doesn't feel very Jesus-y. And in many ways, it doesn't matter whether Yusuf was the second coming or just an immigrant in need of a friend. Didn't Jesus himself say, "Whatever you do to the least of my brothers, that you do unto me"? Or something along those lines. I didn't pay enough attention in RE. Plus, there's also the idea that those who'd bang the drum of Christianity in the name of nationalism or to marginalise certain groups probably wouldn't like Jesus all that much if they actually met him. They'd just dismiss his ideas and tell him to get a haircut and a decent pair of shoes. Some of them might even find him a bit foreign for their liking, which sounds ridiculous when you say it out loud, but there you go. How he's treated in the episode is kind of weird, to be honest. First he gets frotted by Penny for comedic effect, then he's felt up by Brian before getting stabbed by an old man with a pitchfork. And yeah, did anyone else just know someone was getting impaled by the end of the episode as soon as they saw the gardening equipment? Although I did wonder if that was going to happen by accident somehow. Anyway, I get that Penny and Brian are both sexually repressed, but really? Having them rubbing themselves up against the first non-family member we see like a pair of horny cats just felt a bit desperate. I mean, just because Brian might be gay shouldn't make him a predator, and as for Penny, well, if the roles were reversed in that scene, then it might not have been very funny at all. Also, I'm not sure if I missed something, but I have no idea what motivated Brian to start stabbing Jesus. His victim had already been seriously wounded by a dementia patient who had no idea what was going on, plus he was already on the floor and no longer a threat to anyone. At first I thought Brian was actually going for a mercy kill and maybe he was going to slit his throat or something, because getting stabbed in the gut is an incredibly prolonged and painful way to die. I kind of get why Brian was initially defensive in front of Youssef. Kind of reminded me of the scene where Meg first appears in Tom and Jerry, as it's one thing to talk about helping the needy, but might feel a bit different when a stranger appears in your house. But it wasn't even his house. Not now, anyway. And also I'm not sure that he and Penny would even get it as part of the inheritance. Because while Dawn was not Ralph's biological daughter, she was still raised as his child and is still taking care of him into adulthood, and it's probably still Ralph's name on her birth certificate. Of course, it all depends how the will is worded and whether they specify biological child, but I'm not sure that Dawn would be disinherited that easily. I mean, it's a house, not a dynasty. But anyway, back to Stabby Brian. What was the point of that scene? Was it to say that a Remain voter could potentially be an arsehole too? I mean, yeah, statistically some of them will be. But there's being a dick at a family gathering and there's doing a bad murder, and there's quite a jump in between the two of those. Maybe sexually molesting Jesus in your sister-in-law's living room falls somewhere in between? I don't know, but these are some very weird takes to have, and I'm not sure what I was supposed to think. Guys, help me out here. Am I missing something? So, in summary, they waved some flags, they killed Jesus, and then everything went back to normal. And that's the end of Series 6. From the podcast, it also sounds like filming this episode was a continuity nightmare, so fair play to them for that. Overall, I think it's been a very interesting series of number 9, and I thought they did brilliantly with all the extra challenges that 2020 brought. As always, lads, well done. So that's it for now in terms of reviews, but as I said, I am planning to do a bit of a Series 6 summary, seeing as we have no new number 9 to look forward to next week. If there was a particular scene, performance, joke or haircut that you'd like me to mention, then please let me know in the comments. I don't always get the time to respond to all of them, but I do read them and I'm going to try my best to catch up with as many as I can. Also, I'm not sure how many of you are aware of this, but we actually got a visit in last week's comments section from the actor who played Vomiting Carol. I'm just so happy about that. Plus, this marks the first time that somebody from the show has made contact with my little channel. Also, it looks like I'm about to hit a mini milestone as my very first Inside Number 9 video is now very close to hitting 100,000 views. I just can't believe it. Back when I posted it, I honestly thought that only a handful of people were ever going to watch it, but you all proved me wrong, and to that, all I can say is thanks. Everybody, stay safe, stay well, and please join me back here again for the Series 6 roundup. Till then, bye bye.